The Propagation of the Gospel. 9. The Third Missionary Journey. Residence at Ephesus and Journey to Jerusalem. The eastern coast of the Aegean Sea, opposite Achaia, was early settled by colonies from Greece. They gave the name of Asia to this region, and it gradually came to characterize a considerable extent of territory in that neighborhood. After some time, the name attached itself to the whole peninsula between the Mediterranean and the Euxine, and finally to the whole continent. Thus, what was primarily the designation of only a diminutive region became the name of the largest of the grand divisions of the earth. In the time of our history, Asia proper was as yet only the Roman province, embracing about 1/3 of what is known in modern times as Asia Minor. It is interesting to Christian students from the fact that the gospel was here widely disseminated at an early day, and that here were situated all of the 7 churches which special revelations were made through St. John, the last of the prophets, the mysterious seer of the new dispensation. Now, if he wrote at or before the time of the rewrite that we call the Gospel of John, then the other Gospels weren't written, so the not adding to the book wasn't saying that it was talking about his own book. It wasn't even part of a collection at that point, or we don't see that it's like, well, remember, add this to the end of the Bible. We don't see that there. So he wasn't saying he was the last prophet. And didn't Jesus say the last prophet would be among the Ishmaelites? The Steele of the prophet that they were waiting for? The Comforter? Of this Roman province, Ephesus was the capital, and as this was for a longer period than perhaps any other residence of Paul, and at a later period for some years the home of John, as it was a most influential center from which the gospel was propagated, it is proper that we have some brief account of it. Its situation was most favorable for commerce, both by sea and by land. It consequently became a large, populous, and very wealthy city long before the Christian era. In the time of Paul, it was probably as flourishing as at any previous period, and its influence was felt far and near. It had many distinguished and costly buildings. Prominent among these was the theater, the ruins of which are with difficulty traced, but which is doubtless the same in which the Ephesian populace assembled in the excitement caused by the outcry of Demetrius and his fellow silversmiths against Paul, whose successful preaching of Christ was likely to interfere with their trade in the shrines of the chief deity of their city. But most famous of its edifices was that of the temple of Diana, the tutelary goddess of the Ephesians. This was so magnificent and costly as to be accounted one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was several times rebuilt, each time doubtless with increased splendor. The edifice before that, of the time of which we are now speaking, had been destroyed by fire on the very night of the birth of Alexander the Great, being set on fire by a certain Erostratus, who confessed that he had no other motive but to immortalize his name. Such immortality as it is he seems to have achieved, The new temple was 220 years in building and was the largest of all the Greek temples, being about 4 times the size of the Parthenon at Athens. It was magnificently decorated with sculptures by Praxiteles and a great painting by Apelles. The statue of Diana was of ivory, furnished with exquisitely wrought golden ornaments. A considerable part of the trade of the city was concerned with the manufacture and sale of silver miniature images or models of the statue of the idol. Hence, the purely secular motive of Demetrius and his fellow tradesmen is evident. It is also evident that Paul's preaching had been very successful when such numbers were converted from idolatry as to endanger the business of producing these shrines of what they considered to be a goddess. Acts 18, 23, and 26, 19, 20, Nero Emperor, 54 to 68 of the Common Era, events of the lesson 55 through 57, beginning of the third missionary journey, tour of Galatia and Phrygia, 1823. Where were these regions? Apollos at Ephesus. What was his character and his religious relations? What did he need in order to profitable preaching? How was this supplied? 24 through 26. Whither did he go after this? How was he introduced to the brethren there? And what was the effect of his ministry among them? 27, 28. Do we find any incidental confirmation of Apollos' ministry at Corinth? In Paul's writings, 1 Corinthians 3, 4 through 6, and 22. Paul again at Ephesus. What singular facts are here mentioned? 19, 1 through 3. How do you connect it with 18, 24, and 25? Paul's instruction of these disciples and the result, 4 through 7. How long did Paul continue to present the gospel in the Jewish synagogue? 8. What was the consequence of his preaching to his countrymen? And what did he do on this account? 9. How long did he continue to preach in this Gentile locality, and with what success? What is meant by Asia here? What powerful manifestations accompanied his preaching? Verse 11 and 12. Accepted imitations of Paul's miraculous power, and the result, 13 through 16, effect upon the people, verse 17. Evidences of religious reformation in the converts, 18 through 20. The value of the magical books destroyed. A silver piece or denarius was worth about 15 cents of our money. And what did this indicate? 20. Well, the dollar 100 years ago was this book, something like 100 years ago or more. But actually, the implication of this is non-Christian media. So, so do you agree with the thing of destroying every secular means of propaganda and everything outside of your group? I think it'd be better to respond to things than to destroy them, but Paul's purpose? What preparation did he make towards carrying it out? 21-22 disturbance? Excited by Demetrius? What was the real motive? What does it indicate as to the success of Christianity in Ephesus? What was the most notable edifice in Ephesus? Can you give any account of it? Relate any remarkable incident connected with its history, 23 through 27, the result of the harangue of Demetrius, effect on the disciples, meeting in the theater, and Paul's bold venture kindly prevented, the confusion and uproar, and the futile attempt of Alexander to speak. What possible reference is made to this person in Paul's writing? See 2 Timothy 4:14 and 15. Why would not this multitude hear him? 28 through 34. Cry in uproar. Appear to the magistrate. His argument and advice. 35 through 41. Paul's departure to Macedonia. What were some of the places he would be likely to visit there? Arrival in Greece. What city would he probably make his headquarters there, and how long did he stay? What occurred to change his mind as to the journey to Syria? 20:1 through 3. Companions to his journey, verse 4. What reason have we to suppose that Luke was of this party? 5. Philippi in Troas, and conference with the disciples at Troas, protracted address, and one of the consequences, the restoration. Further conference and departure, 6 through 12. Further incidents of the journey, arrival at Miletus, 30 through 15. Where was Miletus? In the neighborhood of what important city? Paul's haste and the reason of it. Verse 16. What took place at Miletus? Give the main points of Paul's address, 17 through 35. What expectation does he utter concerning himself, 22 through 25? What warning does he give the Ephesian brethren, 29 and 30? What elements of his character are manifest in this address, 19, 20, and 24? 27, 33 through 35. Effect on the Ephesian disciples, 36 through 38. And let's remember that Luke was a writer from, the Luke that the gospel was somebody of 60 years later, 60, 70 years later from this, so I don't remember Matthew, Mark, and Luke which year, but ranging from the 20s, the 30s, and the 140s. I don't remember the chronological order of when we find the first manuscripts. Actually, 150 is one of them, the earliest parts of one of them.